So here's what's going to happen next. If you didn't watch my last two videos, I would encourage you to do so you have a little bit of context to know what I'm going to talk about today. As many of you know, 90% of you, I presume, you already know that the Russians used for the first time ever in combat history an intermediate range ballistic missile. We initially thought it was an intercontinental ballistic missile, tomato. This is in fact worse. This is an intermediate range ballistic missile, and these were actually banned up until 2019 when the Trump administration, or the United States, let's just call it the United States because I don't want to get anybody's panties in a twist about politics. This is beyond politics, and this is why Trump hasn't said anything yet. We'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But in the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, they got rid of these because the reasoning is that the time it takes for one of these to travel to another European center is too small to be able to possibly de-escalate the situation via negotiations, okay? So at least with an ICBM, it gives you a little bit of time. You got to do a few more things, and it takes around 30 minutes to get to the other side of the planet. Whereas these intermediate range missiles, they're so fast and they reach their target in less than 10 minutes that it makes the possibility for negotiation. So it was seen as de-escalatory through the non-proliferation age to try to get rid of these. That's one step. That's something that both countries agreed on. Trump backed out of the deal because both sides accused each other of violating. Today, Russia has really explicitly violated that. This is actually worse than an intercontinental ballistic missile that we talked about today for the aforementioned reasons. Now, what does this demonstrate? This alien-like technology that looks like they're teleporting aliens down to Earth. This is important because, of course, it's a demonstration, and it's a proven demonstration of Russia's multiple independent reentry vehicle technology. This is not particularly new per se. This is on their Sarmat missile systems. The United States have the same technology, albeit some people say that the Russians is more advanced, but I guess that's yet to be seen. We've never seen it used in combat before. And this is essentially what's happening here is you have 6 of these containers that comes out of the main missile. And these 6 containers all contain these multiple independent reentry vehicles. They can be specifically targeted. Fortunately, in this case, they were inert, which is why you don't see any explosions. So they're just relying on kinetic energy when they hit the ground, okay? So you don't see any explosions. It's just lightning fast, 3 kilometers per second. Completely impossible to be able to intercept these with anything that we currently have. Even if you were able to master some kind of projected energy weapon, I don't think that you'd be able to stop something like that, especially if it's just relying on sheer kinetic force. So this is it's really a rebranded RS-26, and we're going to talk about why that's important in just a moment. But understand, this is a breach of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, and this was clearly a message to Trump. So you can see it a bit more precisely here. You get better frame rate, so you can actually see the independent vehicles hitting. They used to call these rods from God, the tungsten weapon, the kinetic energy weapon that had no radiation but was as destructive. But this is more like a nuclear buckshot than a nuclear slug. I'm going to tell you what I think is going to happen in just a moment, so you're going to want to stick with me while I get through all of the minutiae here. Okay, so the important thing to take note of is that this happened in a major city of 1 million people, on the outskirts of a major city, nonetheless close enough that the Russians were sending a message not only that their technology works, okay, that they have this capability, and if these had nuclear weapons on them, holy shit, would that ever be catastrophic. We're talking in the megatonnage of potential nuclear detonations. But they've also demonstrated here the accuracy and the precision, because it was thought at one point that the Russians would only be able to use this technology, and maybe this is still the case with ICBMs, but there'd be a wide margin of error, possibly like hundreds of meters, if not meters, kilometers even. Okay, so maybe not with these intermediate range ones, but the fact that they could do this with such pinpoint precision in a major city whilst avoiding a major civilian catastrophe is a message that they're sending to NATO that, hey, we can hit wherever we want with pinpoint precision, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it, and we can do it in under 10 minutes, pretty much no matter where you look across the map. So these things have a range. I believe the actual range is more like 6,000 kilometers, so pretty much they can hit anywhere in Europe in a matter of a few minutes, and so exceptionally problematic. And I'm thinking that this is what the purpose of SpaceX truly is. It's to have, it's to weaponize space and to have a whole new kind of system where at any moment the actual time that it takes to put a nuke on target is down to possibly a sub-minute level, into the seconds. If you have nuclear weapons in space that could be immediately deployed, then that's game over, right? And that's where we're heading. So, but I don't think we're gonna, I think we're going to see a nuclear event first. Now, let's talk about the background a little bit about what preceded this. Yesterday, Russian MP Volodin, he was the president of the State Duma. He said this explicitly, and everybody just thought, oh, he's just bluffing. He did not rule out the use of new weapon systems that the Russian Federation has not yet used on the territory of Ukraine. So this is in response to the West's first use of storm shadows that were now confirmed today in Vladimir Putin's speech. So we know it with 100% certainty now, because the Russian MOD is never going to admit to something like that unless they don't have to. And they admitted that they had targeted the Bryansk region as well as the Kursk region. And they also, I think Putin denied that there was actual generals and North Korean generals that were killed, but some other reports contradict that. Anyways, so that's something to understand, is that we knew this was going to happen yesterday because Ukrainian intelligence had determined, let's get real, they don't have that kind of intelligence. Western intelligence cleared out all the embassies, okay? That was number one. As far as I know, that doesn't happen too often throughout this war. That could have possibly even been the first time that it happened. They've issued travel advisories all the time. Clearing out the embassies are another story altogether. So we knew that they were expecting a big attack. We also knew that the RS-26 mobile ICBM platform, and I've talked about this in yesterday's video, and remember when I said that, well, it's probably just posturing and they're just signaling that they're serious. There's no way that they would use this in a conventional fashion, and if they did, that would signal that maybe they're running out of conventional weapons, and so they're dipping into these other capabilities. Well, I was wrong. I was right in the sense that I brought it to your attention and that it was credible information, but I was wrong in the sense that I didn't think that they would necessarily have any reason to use it. So they knew that this was going to happen a day before it happened. Now, the Ukrainian government itself is constantly downplaying the risks of attack with its people. But again, all of these governments, foreign governments, were removing people from their embassies. So we know that they knew this in advance. Now they're trying to say that the Russians notified them about a half an hour in advance through a specific de-escalation channel called the National Nuclear Risk Reduction Center. And I guess they have a line of communication there, despite the fact that they're not on the red line is essentially inoperable and there's not a lot of diplomacy going on because there's no ambassador inside Washington. They were notified, according to Pentagon spokesperson Sabrina Singh, right before this happens. But we know that they knew it was going to happen yesterday. And we know that between yesterday, when they knew this was going to happen, and when it happened, they actually did another attack using storm shadows. So despite the fact that they knew that this was going to be the Russian response, and even if the Pentagon says that they knew it was going to happen, they don't know what the Russians' true intent. They don't know if the Russians are just saying, yeah, there's not going to be a nuke on it, but there actually is. Okay, so the Russians notified the United States in advance so the United States doesn't go into DEFCON 2 or whatever. And but they don't really know if they can trust that, because for all they know, the Russians are just telling them that we're not going to be putting nukes on these things, it's going to be non-nuclear, when in reality it is, and then what, right? So then that limits your capability to do a response. So what this means is that they knew, and they're intentionally provoking the Russians into doing some crazy shit. We still have 59 days to go until inauguration. And so far this week, every day has seemed like a damn week in and of itself. So imagine where we're going to be if we make it to January 20th without a major incident. Now, Trump has not said anything specifically about this. He's had plenty of opportunity. And have you noticed all this news about Matt Gaetz? Western media is being incredibly silent about all of this. Okay, they understand the severity of intermediate range ballistic missiles. They understand what's truly going on. Don't be fooled by the Pentagon spokeslady who tries to dismiss this as a nothing burger, Putin's bluffing, blah, blah, blah. All of this theatrics with Gaetz, something just seems wrong with that. They seem like they caved in way too easily, for reasons I'm not going to get into. But it's very convenient that all of that is happening while World War III is literally starting. Okay, this is as close as we've ever and probably, hopefully, will ever get without it going to that next level. We'll talk about what else can possibly happen that's escalatory before it actually goes nuclear, but there really isn't much at this point. There's a few things that can happen, but there really isn't that much. So the United States and Ukraine, and we've been saying this all along, we've been talking about potential for false flags and all that, are intentionally provoking the Russians because they genuinely believe, okay, get this, they genuinely believe that they can have a contained nuclear exchange with the Russians. And the proof of that is what this guy Buchanan, I think he is he the commander of Stratcom? What did he say specifically today? I have the specific. Okay, so this is what he said. Rear Admiral Thomas Buchanan of U.S. Stratcom. He emphasized the following. The U.S., if it turned out that Russia used a nuclear weapon, he didn't specify where, but if it turned out that the U.S., that the Russians used a nuclear weapon, U.S. would act in a way that maintains its position in a world as a world leader and ensures its interests are protected in any potential nuclear exchange. So they say exchange, so allowing for event just with that statement that would not necessarily escalate to mutually assured destruction, full-blown global thermonuclear war. Then he talks about the deterrence strategy. In a nuclear exchange, the U.S. would retain part of its nuclear arsenal for deterrence, ensuring it has enough capacity to prevent further threats. Essentially allowing, and I don't know if he misspoke, if he said something he wasn't supposed to. We know that the United States has a provision in there for a first strike use, unlike the Russians and the Chinese. Really, that's the nuclear doctrines. They don't really matter. At the end of the day, if the shit's going to hit the fan, they're going to do whatever is in the interest of their country's survival, regardless, be it Russia, China, United States, it doesn't matter. But think about what he's saying there. He's saying that we're going to retain part of our nukes if we get in a nuclear shooting match, okay? So he's essentially saying that we're willing to sacrifice a certain amount of cities, maybe a certain amount of targets. Likely wouldn't be cities. It's likely going to be targets, military targets. But we're willing to get into a nuclear shooting match with Russia, and then we're going to maintain a certain amount of nukes just to make sure it doesn't escalate. They're essentially saying that they're ready to fight a nuclear war with the Russians. Now, the question has to be, why on earth would they get in a nuclear shooting? Why is this issue so damn important? Why is this, is it personal? Is it people trying to avoid going to jail like Netanyahu right now, who's about to ramp things up with Iran just to take attention off of this ICC stuff? Or is it that the United States is in an existential financial crisis And the only way they can get out of it is with a massive global conflict. The only way they can maintain global hegemony is to try to destroy both Russia and China before they can become a true threat. I think that's what this is all about. And it's probably a lot of social psychology and groupthink and all the rest. But the Pentagon is being incredibly flippant about this. And just understand that this could have been a nuclear exchange. This could have been a nuclear detonation. Even though the Pentagon says, oh yeah, the Russians told us it wasn't going to be. It could have been. And for that reason, they should have notified the world if they had that specific intelligence, especially considering they knew the day before it was going to happen. So this is where these things don't really add up. They knew specifically, almost specifically, they didn't know what Putin was going to call it and maybe how it was modified, but they knew it was going to be an RS-26 or 28. I can't remember which one it was. They knew it was moving around. So they're seeing all this stuff from satellites, right? They have this intelligence, but they're not telling us. Do you truly think a country that would allow people to buy into scams like this? Let's go find, to buy into scams like this one that's crashing harder than a mofo today. MicroStrategies, okay, down, I don't know, like 30, 40% in a day. Michael Saylor's scheme to sell stocks, to buy Bitcoin so that his stock pumps up. It's a total Ponzi scheme scam. Do you think a government that's going to allow, us to print trillions and trillions of dollars is responsible in any way? I mean, just think about everything that's happened in the last, 4 years. These people are not, they don't have our best interests in mind. And for that reason, you cannot rely on them to tell you when the shit is going to hit the fan. I mean, look how quickly all our attention got taken away from the Middle East and now it's back on Russia. I guarantee you it's going to go back to Iran because we have some news about that particular situation. But we're just being like we're a cat with a laser pointer, just one thing to another. So easy to manipulate. And they absolutely will not tell you if the shit is going to hit the fan. They'll have some noble lie, rationalization that, we had to tell you this lie to protect you for your own good, for the good of the country, and blah, 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 blah. All right, so that's essentially what is happening. There was also, while this was occurring, more attacks in Krasnodar inside Russia. Okay, so the Ukrainians are attacking inside Russia while Russia is sending these ICBMs over. So they don't care about escalation. They want Russia to do some crazy shit. And here's what I think they're going to do, all right? I think Putin has said the following, okay? He said the following: Moscow reverses the right to strike military facilities of countries that allow their weapons to be used against the Russian territory. Vladimir Putin has said, we will determine the targets during further tests of our newest missile defense system based on threats of the security of the Russian Federation. So he's basically saying now, he's given the final red line that we reserve the right to attack countries who provide Ukraine the weapons to attack us. Chiefly amongst them will be probably the UK because they're closest. I can't see them attacking the United States, but that's still very possible. They have submarines that could do it, although those submarines are nuclear, and I don't think they're going to go nuclear just yet. In fact, I don't think they're going to attack a NATO country yet at all. Here's what I think they're going to do, because if they were to attack a NATO country, that would, right now, you have a lot of people on the fence, especially in Europe, about their support for Ukraine. There's a lot of people waning in their support, okay? Even though, especially in the westernmost part of Europe, they still support Ukraine and they're still very anti-Trump. They're still, it's not going to take much for them to lose interest, especially when the economy continues to go into the pisser. So if Putin was to attack one of those countries, even if he broadcast it in advance and he said, okay, Poland or the UK, we're going to take out, such and such a base, so remove your guys. We don't want to hurt anybody. We're going to do this attack. And we're only going to use conventional weapons. We're not going to use nuclear ones. Even if he did that, that's exactly what Europe would use against him, okay? And that all this would do is increase support for Ukraine. But what he could do, because this is a Soviet-era underground industrial facility that's building ballistic missiles for Kiev so that they can have their own ballistic missiles. And I don't think it was destroyed as strong as of an impact as all of these would have had, traveling at the speed, 100 kilogram reentry vehicles, traveling at Mach 10. Despite that, I don't think they had the penetration power to get all the way down into these bunkers. The bunkers in Ukraine are numerous. Remember, Ukraine had the third largest nuclear arsenal up until the Cold War ended. And the Russians probably have all the blueprints for all the bunkers, Cold War era stuff ever built there. And I'm sure it rivals Moscow in some places in terms of the depths and the capabilities of these bunker systems. This is why, just taking over a steel plant in Mariupol took so long, and Bakhmut, because there's all kinds of like salt mines and places that they're fighting out of, and probably a lot of Soviet era bunker stuff, okay? So they know exactly where to hit. They know probably where Ukraine's building these. They got great human intelligence, as is the case on both sides. I think what they're going to do first, I need to show you something, okay? You're not going to see this anywhere else. It's really simple, actually. I mean, anybody could draw this. I'm not a great artist, but it's a simple concept, and it's called systematic desensitization, okay? So understand, back in 2022, early 2022, if they would have dropped a nuke right out the gates, right when they started to be pushed back by Ukraine, holy shit, would there ever be a freakout, a massive global panic at the time, right? So this is a nuclear weapon, okay? And up here is using a nuke, and this is time, okay? So if we were to start here, the shock would have been massive. But as we've progressed, different things have happened. They've given nukes to Belarus. They've done tactical nuclear exercises. They backed out of treaties. And you'll notice how it retraces a little bit each time. Because after, every time something big is about to happen and it doesn't quite go nuclear, Normalcy Norman comes in and says, you see, nothing bad is ever going to happen. Then the tension rises again. And then all of a sudden, boom, they're actually doing live tactical nuclear exercises. They're doing nationwide Mad Max nuclear drills, okay? They're demonstrating new missile technology. Then you got the North Koreans in there, okay? And then, and on and on and on. And just the constant escalation that has happened. And now you've actually had the demonstration of what it would visually look like to see these things coming down. And in fact, this isn't that impressive because of what we've seen in Iran. So we've been systematically desensitized to how this war is escalating. So such that, should we now reach a situation where this is a nuclear weapon, we're here, the shock now after seeing that is not going to be that great. Like right now, if they detonated a tactical nuke tomorrow, because think about those giant mushroom cloud explosions that we've seen of ammo depots going up. That's already stuff people have seen. It's not like people have seen it now. They've been primed. They've been conditioned to it. So they'll much easier adapt to a reality of the use of tactical nuclear weapons. And I guarantee you, the first use of a nuke, Normalcy Norman is going to come in that very day, and he's going to come on my channel, and he's going to say, see, it didn't evolve into global thermonuclear war. I guarantee you. And it's because of this. It's exactly because of this. Now, here's what I think could happen. This was a signal to Trump. This was a signal to the West. And this was a signal to Ukraine. They're going to do it in Ukraine. I'm convinced of that. If they're going to do it, they're going to do it in Ukraine. And they're going to use they're going to detonate a nuke underground. They're going to use a bunker-busting nuke. For starters, you don't have the optics. So the West is going to come out and say, you'll see this, but you're not going to see the big mushroom cloud explosion. I'm sure you'll see something, but it's not going to be what you see in the movies, okay? And this is why this incrementalism that Vladimir Putin is practicing right now, and the West, because it takes two to tango, is so dangerous. because first they're going to detonate the nuke underground. You're not going to see it. So, well, it's going to be broadcast all over the news. People aren't going to have something visual to accompany with it. So it's not going to be as flashbulb of an event. You're going to remember where you were when you hear about it happening. But unless you have the optics, unless you have the mushroom cloud, that visual mushroom cloud, it's not going to be Karaganov doctrine, which is you need a shock and awe. So there's two schools of thought in Russian strategic warfare. One is that we need to use a nuke, the biggest possible nuke we can, as soon as we can, to show the West that we mean business, because we know that they're going to keep pushing until we push back. They think we're bluffing. Right now it's a game of chicken. The other incrementalist approach is what Putin is trying to do right now. He's trying to give us every possible opportunity to pull back from the brink. The problem is that the next step, there's a few next steps. One next step could be the arming of the Houthis to attack warships in the Red Sea with hypersonic missiles that the United States and its allies in the region are not going to be able to defend against. That's one possible option. That would be a mirror option. And Putin talked about mirroring today, about how they're going to reciprocate whatever the West does. However, I think that's not going to cut it. For starters, I think the aircraft carrier in the region just pissed off, because I think they knew that this was a possibility. There's going to be another one going there, but nonetheless, that is one other place that we could see escalation, but I would have presumed they would have already done that if they were planning on doing that. The other thing they could do is to continue to demonstrate these types of weapons, but if they just do this again, they can't do this again. Like, they can't just, the next time Storm Shadows fall on whatever and kill, a couple more Russian generals, they can't just do this again, because it's going to not have any effect on the West's directive, which is to essentially strategically defeat Russia, okay? So they have to escalate it. Maybe they're going to test an SLBM, a submarine-launched ballistic missile. And that's going to be the next demonstration of force. But even that is really just horizontal escalation at this point. So they have to use a nuke. They have to use a nuke. Well, at least we're a few moves away. I can't see, I don't know what is between here and here, but it ain't much. Okay? It ain't much. And the most gradual way to normalize it would be to put a nuke in the ground, it detonates, okay, we can detect the radiation. The next day you see guys walking around in hazmat suits, and that's what gets the optics on the mainstream media. But you don't see the mushroom cloud. However, the next step, when you do see the mushroom cloud, it's not as bad, right? Because you already knew, well, they've already used the nuke. Now it's just an above ground nuke. It's an air burst or a ground burst or whatever. But it's not something that was detonated underground. I don't even know the degree to which they're capable of doing that, but I'm certain that they have that capability to detonate the nuke underground. Like, get it to go, I don't know, however many meters deep, and then detonate it to minimize the optics of it. So I think, and that would make sense from a strategic point of view, because there's very few places where you would use a tactical nuke right now. Like, you could maybe use one on, I'm sure the Ukrainian military is consolidated in certain places, but by and large, it's been largely dispersed and decentralized for this very region. You don't have barracks full of troops just waiting to get hit with missiles anymore, because they've learned their lesson. But the thing that they can't hide is an underground weapons manufacturing facility. And because Russia has all the blueprints, they've probably done the tests, they probably know what it's going to take to get down that deep and render these places inoperable. This would be the only practical use of a tactical nuke, in my personal opinion. I could be wrong about this, but based on what I've listened to, and I listened to a lot of experts, as far as I know, maybe there's some infrastructure. Maybe you could make an argument that you would use it for a decapitation strike. And there actually is rumors that they're going to target the Ukrainian parliament building or some embassies. I can't see, and with this technology too, you're talking about multiple independent reentry vehicles, but only one needs to have a tactical nuke on it, right? So I'm sure it would be multiple of these. And look at the accuracy of that. Like, this is replaying, but they are going to different places. Just the precision of it. It's absolutely terrifying stuff. And this was the call that I talked about today. So Maria Zakharova, who is the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson, she stopped the press conference to take a call today, which was just out of character for these guys. They don't do this kind of stuff as far as I know. And if they did it, they wouldn't broadcast it unless it was approved to be broadcast. So the guy on the phone is telling her, okay, we're not talking about the missile because Vladimir is going to come on and give his emergency update. Vladimir, by the way, looked quite tense when he came out and he gave that emergency announcement about exactly what had happened. Far more tense than I had seen him thus far. So we're seeing a lot of gameplay. We are in such a critical period of time. I'm telling you, man. I'm looking forward to the weekends when I don't have to make a decision as to whether or not my kids go to school during the day. Let's see what she has to say. I can't remember what she's saying here, so I have to just play it. I know I got these clips for a reason. Let's see what Sabrina Singh has to say first.
So I can confirm that Russia did launch an experimental intermediate range ballistic missile.
Which is, intermediate range nuclear forces treaty, which is no more. She just glazed over that.
This IRBM was based on Russia's RS-26 Rubezh intercontinental ballistic missile.
Just like I just said.
Model. In terms of notifications to the United States was pre-notified briefly before the launch through nuclear risk reduction channels. For more, I'd refer you to state on that. And I think your third question was on our reaction to Putin's comments.
So they don't really talk about, whether or not this is a big deal, but I think Pierre says something about it.
Doctrine. And so Russia has been signaling its attempt to update its doctrine for several weeks and observing no changes to Russia's nuclear posture. We have not seen any reason to adjust our own nuclear posture or doctrine in response to Russia's statements. So
this is complete nonsense. They literally have, all the stuff that we've told you guys, from the tactical nuclear drills to the putting the ICBMs on combat duty to the Russians themselves saying we're in the highest state of possible readiness. The Russians are in like DEFCON 2 right now. So I don't know what planet she's living on.
This is more of the same irresponsible rhetoric that we continue to hear from Russia, which we have seen for the past more than 2 years.
They're not going to tell you when the shit is going to hit the fan. I hope that's clear to everybody. This is exactly what you're going to hear the hour before the shit hits the fan. They're going to say the same damn thing. Just watch.
Now, if you think about their aggression, their war against Ukraine, and so, and I've talked about it a little bit moments ago about the use of DPRK soldiers in combat operations against Ukraine. It presents a significant escalation of its war.
Why, though? Why does that even... really, when you think about it, okay, so the North Koreans provide 10,000, 20... at the end of the day, does that really even matter that much? I don't know. North Korea is a small country, impoverished. Does it really matter? It only matters, I guess, if they think that the North Koreans have significant capability, which they always disparage the North Koreans and say they don't. So I don't know what the big deal is. Sounds like they just want a bigger, broader war.
Yeah, they are the ones... they, meaning Russia, are the ones that are escalating this war. And so we are not...
You just allowed them to shoot missiles inside Russia. When Biden said that... Remember when Biden said, that would mean World War III? Remember those days? Doesn't that seem like a decade ago? When the old man could still kind of talk? And he said, if we provide these weapons, They've pretty much provided everything, from the F-16s to long-range missiles. Next is JSOMs, and then for all we know, it's nukes.
Going to be deterred here. We're going to continue. We're going to certainly continue to be there for you, the brave people of Ukraine.
That's all, folks. So I'm not going to get into specifics. I'm not going to say shit. I'm just here to get a paycheck, and my time's almost up. So see you later. Okay, so here is, I believe, let's just hear what this guy has to say. I think he is in, judging by the background, it looks like Russia, but it could, I think it's, he's a Ukrainian, part of the Ukrainian government. I'll give you one piece of information. I could be totally wrong about this, but let's just see. It definitely smacks of Russian production, but let's just see. We are being informed about receiving information about the threat of a missile attack on Grushevsky Strait 5 in the coming days. This is the Ukrainian parliament. Well, we'll see if this happens or not. But I see that Putin has raised the stakes to the max for the Ukrainian people, for the population, and it is obvious that Ukraine should react to this. So this has to be in Ukraine. But it is not so much Ukraine that should react to this, but in addition to Ukraine, the international community should react. Okay? Thank you, Lord Bebo, for your great service, your great videos, your captioning, I should say. And then we have the Army Chief of England saying the following. Oh man, I don't know, like, do these guys, see, they know that they can't fight the Russians conventionally, so when he says this shit, understand what he means. He means that it's going to go nuclear if their submarines don't catch on fire beforehand like they have in the last year.
If the British Army was asked to fight tonight, yes, it would fight tonight. And I don't think anybody in this room should be under any illusion that if the Russians invaded Eastern Europe tonight, then we would meet them in that fight. That would be the first point I'd make.
Thank you, General. Yeah, no, I'm absolutely certain that if the Russians invaded Eastern Europe, the British Army would be there. I'm a reserve officer, so I would probably be there with them.
Okie dokie. It's your funeral, I guess. Yeah, if they invade the Baltics, which I can't see Putin doing that when he is basically bogged down in Ukraine. I think that's the extent of the information that I have to provide you today. I think I've covered all of the bases. There's probably a few more things, and we could talk a little bit about this Iranian situation. Our attention will be taken back to Iran. Make no doubts about it. Okay, so Kadyrov made another statement. Kadyrov's statements are like, you know, they're usually a couple years premature, kind of like yours truly. The problem with being so early is, you know, never be the first and last to do anything, they say. He says, Kadyrov, in reference to the Orishnik, that's the name of the missile that was fired today, they, the West, are sitting comfortably, quite peacefully over there in the West. So let them feel on their own skin what real war is like. It's time to deliver a powerful strike on the objects of those states that are afraid to openly acknowledge their involvement in the war. So he is hinting that, in fact, they're going to do a strike on NATO. I'm sure that's going to come at some point, but I think we're still a few moves away from that. I think that's about all we got to talk about on that front. Now, of course, the internet is abuzz about Netanyahu potentially going to jail if he goes to Canada. Because Justin Trudeau today had said that if Netanyahu comes to Canada, that they are going to respect international law. It kind of got put on the spot, I would say. But, excuse me, who knows if that's really, I'm sure Biden's going to, you know, call him up and be like, or whoever represents Biden nowadays is going to call him up and set him straight, unfortunately. Because, quite frankly, if Netanyahu went to jail, I bet you we would de-escalate the situation in the Middle East. But because he's about self-preservation at this point in time, that means that now that after the things that have happened today with Iran, it's almost guaranteed that they're going to escalate the conflict in a massive way. And I'm not sure if this move by the ICC, especially today. It just seems weird that they would do all this today. There was so much news today. Bird flu, political fiascos, the Gates thing, the Russian nuclear thing, the Iranian nuclear thing, and the ICC thing. And that was all before lunchtime. And so it seems as though that there was a motive here to maybe try and take attention away from Europe and bring it back into the Middle East. I'm not sure exactly. I haven't really thought about that too much. But sure enough, Lindsey Graham is getting ready to impose sanctions on the International Criminal Court. I mean, you couldn't make this up. In the future, I don't know what they're going to write about us, man, because right now it doesn't look good. It really doesn't look good at all. If we don't win and the other side writes history, it's going to be easy for them to vilify us when they got stuff like this to work with, okay? Now, what happened with Iran was, let me see if I don't think I have any imagery to correspond to what I'm about to say. Oh yeah, I do. This is one of their, I don't know what this is, something nuclear, centrifuge or something. So the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency's Board of Governors, overwhelmingly passed a resolution condemning Iran for expanding its nuclear activities and the lack of cooperation with the agency, the second such resolution in the last 6 months. Now, Iran denies this, and they also threatened that if the IAEA were to release a statement like this, that they would retaliate, and that they did. The Iranians have now stated that they have denounced a US and Europe-backed IAEA resolution as politically driven, despite opposition from half the IAEA board, and Tehran has now ordered the activation of advanced centrifuges, citing national interests and peaceful nuclear goals. This comes, of course, a day after the Ayatollah's right-hand man said that they could have nukes in 24 hours. Iran accused Western nations of undermining constructive talks following the IAEA's director's recent visit to the enrichment sites. Crazy stuff, man. So I would not be surprised if Israel doesn't pull the news media back to the Iran issue very soon. Let's see what the markets are doing. It's incredible. Everything was green today. The Dow was up. The S&P was up marginally. Gold was up. Oil was up. This gold and oil trade after hours. So gold was actually up like up 1%. Oil was up nearly 2%. Crypto was up. Everything was up. Even the dollar was up. And the dollar being up at times like these is scary, because that means that we're approaching a time of global turmoil and people are looking for the cleanest sheet in the dirty laundry basket. Cleanest shirt in the dirty laundry basket is the right metaphor. That always happens when there's global calamity. Even if, the US is in all this debt, they're still the safest place to put your money. And so we have the dollar going up while gold is going up. So the dollar has went up about, I think, 7% from the lows. And gold, if you factor that into gold's price, the actual true price of gold is much higher. And gold has nearly bounced back. I mean, it's about $100 off the highs. But considering how much it plummeted after the Trump slump, I mean, it's pretty much back, it's back within the range it was. So again, there's never anything, you can never go wrong with gold. This whole scam, this MicroStrategy Bitcoin thing that's going on, I'm not saying that Bitcoin can't continue to go higher. In fact, I think that after it crosses the 100,000 Rubicon, you're going to see more media attention. I think that's what all the Bit Bros are waiting for. It's going to hit 100,000 and then people are going to buy in. But what they forget, they think that it's going to be able to go up at the same pace. The only way it goes up at that pace is if the Fed starts buying it, if governments start buying it. Because right now the market cap is over 2 trillion. And so you're talking about, if you want to double your money on Bitcoin now, you got to expect another 2 trillion to be put into the pot by somebody. Where's that money going to come from? Is Trump going to do this Bitcoin reserve nonsense, which is just, I don't know. I mean, I guess you can make a few arguments for it, but not if you're printing the money with debt. Then that just seems weird, right? So if they do that, then maybe the price will go up a little bit. But again, you know, I don't know. It seems like a scam. Go watch a video it's a documentary about the Roaring 20s. They talk about how right before the crash, that's when people were just riding the highest, and that's how it always is. 90% of the stock market was based on margin, meaning that it was money that people were borrowing to put in the stock market right before the crash. And I'm sure there's people doing the same thing with Bitcoin, thinking it's going to go up. But it's a law of diminishing returns. You know, it just requires more. Bird flu is mutating. It's only a matter of time. So we really bat for the cycle today. You know, we had the financial weirdness. We had the pandemic weirdness. We had the political weirdness. We had the nuclear war weirdness on two fronts. So it was a crazy day. They're saying that it's, you know, this a simple way of understanding it is now these birds, which is endemic now in the bird population and wildlife populations. There was a time when they found bird flu and it was a big deal, right? Now it's just everywhere. And the animals end up getting infected by it. So a fox will eat an infected bird. Infected bird will be eaten by a pig on a farm. And then because it becomes so prevalent in these populations that humans might be more inclined to have contact with, that makes the virus more easier to pass to humans, and eventually a certain strain of it jumps into humans, which is transmissible amongst us. So, you know, right now, you know, these virus companies, these biotech companies, they're in the slump because they know Trump's coming back. But, you know, I mean, geez. If you wanted to make an investment and you had no morals, I would actually look at those companies at this point in time, because this shit's coming. It's coming soon, for sure. Share of global payments in U.S. So this makes perfect sense. More share of global payments are in USD as opposed to the euro, because Europe is in a war. And I guess the Europeans haven't caught on yet that the war is less in their interest and more in US interests. Or maybe they have and they're just helpless vassal states. Who knows? Buffett's cash position continues to climb. He knows that people are really stupid, okay? And he knows what the outcome is going to be. So just remember, guys, we are here. We don't know where this is. This is theoretically somewhere up here. It could be one little square, or it could be 10 squares, or it could still be many steps left to go. Regardless, we're getting closer to it. And the closer we get to it, the less the shock is going to be when it happens, which will lead to the normalization of tactical nuclear weapons, something I've been talking about for years. All right, that's all you're going to get out of me today. See you tomorrow.